Vinebound record. It was late in the growing season when the archive's walls felt warm to the touch, as if the tree itself had stored summer in its heartwood. The light came through dappled and soft, carrying the scent of moss and ink. That morning I had just settled at the oaken desk beneath the old window, as I always do when the winds are gentle and the forest speaks in rustles, not roars. And that's when I heard it, a quiet tear like parchment being pulled not by hand, but by root. It came from the lower shelves near the southeast hollow, where ivy had crept long ago and now clung peacefully to the bindings of forgotten tomes. At first, I thought a mouse had returned, perhaps searching for one of my herbal scrolls. But as I approached, the air shifted. The green tendrils were moving, not randomly, not wildly, but with purpose. From the heart of the creeping vine, a single shoot had pushed outward, curling upward and gently wrapping around one of the thick old volumes, one I did not recognize. Its spine was coated in a patina of dust and time, but the leaves of the vine moved as if guided, brushing the dust away like fingertips across a memory. I knelt and watched. The vine trembled, then with a slow and solemn tug, pulled the book from its resting place. It landed not with a thud, but with a softened breath, as if it had simply chosen to return. I carried the volume to my desk, brushing aside my ink pots, and opened it. Inside, pages browned at the edges, filled with a handwriting I had never catalogued, curved, delicate, as if grown rather than written. But what stunned me most was that the words were still moist, like sap just drawn from bark. The text glistened faintly in the light. These were not memories retrieved, but memories delivered. The book told of a village once nestled deep within the southern Tanglewoods. Ellerith's Grove, it said, a name I had never heard, yet one that stirred something in me, like the scent of a long-lost season. The village had lived in communion with the trees, not merely among them. Their archives were not inked, but planted, stories sewn into vines, memories whispered to bark. They believed that no tale was ever truly lost if spoken into the roots. And here it was, proof. Somehow the archive, my archive, had become soil for one of these stories. The vine had carried it across time and silence, and in the warmth of this late season, it had chosen to bloom. I read until the sun dipped low and the lamps needed lighting. The stories within that vine-bound record were not grand histories of kings or wars. They were quieter things. The tale of a midwife who sang to the branches before each birth. The journey of a child who followed a squirrel beyond the canopy and returned a week later, speaking in leaves. The slow fading of a tree whose dreams were too heavy with sorrow. The last entry, dated just before the grove vanished, was a letter, not signed, not addressed, simply written. If you find this tree friend, you are one of us. Speak your story, the roots will listen. I closed the book with trembling feathers. That night I did not write. I walked outside, past the outer shelves, past the moss-laced steps, into the deep hush of the woods. I stood before the archive's oldest tree, her bark thick with age, her hollow wide enough to hold secrets, and I whispered. Not just names, not just facts, I spoke of how it feels to hear a memory before you read it, of the way dust floats like ashlight in the archive's beams, of the ache of holding stories too long inside your chest. I spoke of silence, too, and of how even silence, when cradled gently enough, might grow leaves. And as I finished, I felt a curl against my ankle, a vine no longer seeking a book, only listening, and I in turn listened back. The scribe's green ink. The morning had barely unfolded its wings when I awoke to a peculiar rustling in the eastern alcove of the archive. Not the sharp shuffle of rodents, nor the sigh of pages stirred by wind, but something lighter, deliberate, as if paper itself were stretching after a long sleep. It was a morning woven from mist and dew, and the windows bore the breath of the forest. I lit no lanterns, the pale daylight sufficed. The archive felt alive in a way it hadn't in weeks. The roots beneath my talons pulsed softly, the wood of the desk warm as a resting heart. Then I saw it, a single sheet of parchment, unbound and yellowed at the edges, gently lifting from the surface of the shelf. Not with haste, but with elegance, like a leaf unbothered by gravity. It hovered, turned slowly in the air, then settled upright on the wall as though it had always belonged there. Pinned to nothing, floating, watching. I blinked twice. There were others. Dozens of pages hung across the walls of the eastern wing, some curling like old petals, others fresh and green-edged. I had not placed them there, and yet each bore the mark of my archive, the sigil pressed faintly in the lower corner. Some carried sketches, others bore lines of script in unfamiliar hand. One had only a fingerprint, pressed in sap green ink. Curious, I approached my desk, and there it was, the ink pot. It was not mine. Shaped like a curled pod capped with a leaf-like seal and warm to the touch. Nestled beside it, a quill I did not recognize, its shaft carved of vinewood, its feather not plucked but grown. I uncapped the pot. The scent hit me first, not of iron or soot, but of rain-drenched bark and crushed nettle. The ink within shimmered green, almost alive. I had read of such inks, rare things brewed by forest scribes, used only when one wished to write what could not be said aloud. They called it whisper root. I dipped the quill, hesitated, then pulled a blank sheet toward me. But the page was no longer blank. Even as I watched, lines unfurled across the surface, looped and delicate, in a hand that felt both ancient and intimate. The words wrote themselves. To the one who still listens, I have left you stories. They would not stay on shelves. They drifted, they grew. Some wanted sky, others needed bark. I let them go, forgive the disorder. I read on. This ink knows memory, not just mine but the archive's. Dip gently, it recalls what you forget. And then the line shifted, as though waiting for me. So I wrote, not facts, not records, just impressions. The warmth of the western sun on the stones, the moment a moth rested on an open page, the scent of binding glue and rosemary from yesterday's tea. I didn't write for the shelves, I wrote for the air. and the air listened. The page I finished trembled, lifted, and floated, joining the others in their quiet constellation across the wall. Hours passed, perhaps days. I lost track. I wrote of voices I had heard but never seen, of names that arrived in dreams and faded by dawn, of a song hummed from deep within the roots, and each page found its place, not catalogued but called. One morning I awoke with a leaf in my beak, pale, brittle, veined like memory. It bore a single word: Merlin. I did not know the name, but I felt its weight in my feathers. I searched, and among the hanging pages, near the ivy-covered beam, I found it. A record of a scribe who had once walked these woods centuries ago. She wrote not with her hand, but with silence. Her ink came from green wells beneath the earth. She believed stories were not meant to be kept, but grown. She had left the archive when her heart grew too full, trusting the forest to finish her work. I believe she returned. Not in body, but in ink, in air, in root. That evening I stood beneath the hanging pages, lanterns dimmed. They swayed gently, as if stirred by breath. A slow, fragrant hush filled the room, the scent of moss, parchment, and something like memory, and I whispered, "Thank you." One page drifted down. I caught it before it fell. Blank, waiting.